Yeah, so today we're going to go over some FAM coaching points. Now, these are some points that I've learned over many practice exams and through many quizzes that I've taken. We're going to go through them, and feel free to like adjust these per your needs. These tips don't necessarily apply to the entire population taking FAM, but more so from my experience, what I've learned through taking the practice exams and practice quizzes. So the first thing is you want to get through the first pass of all the questions as quickly as you can. So by the first pass of all the questions, what I mean is ultimately you're going to be doing probably like two or three passes of all the questions, right? Like you're going to be going through them like one time, probably two times, probably three times. You want to get through the first pass as quickly as possible. So if you see a question that's that immediately you know that you don't know how to do, or it's going to take you probably more than 5 minutes, or even the calculations are going to be a bit intensive, the best approach is to actually skip the question and to move on to the next question. And when you do that, you'll hopefully get through the first pass of all the questions as quickly as you can. So ideally, you want to get through all of the questions that you can do within 2 minutes and 30 seconds. If you can find a question that you can do within 2 minutes and 30 seconds, you want to do those first, right? Because all the questions count towards the same number of points. There could even be pilot questions that you don't even know if they actually count towards your score. So you want to make sure that you go through all of the questions as quickly as possible through the first pass. And so ideally, you would have around 10 questions done at least in the first hour. So if you can get through 10 questions, even in 30 minutes, right? In 30 minutes, if you can get through 10 questions, that's a great place to be in terms of your pacing during the exam. So that's the first thing. Get through the first pass of the question as quickly as you possibly can. If you see a question that you know will take a long period of time, it is best to skip it. You don't even know if that question actually counts towards your actual score, because ultimately that could even be a pilot question. So that's the first tip. Second is get through as many passes of all the questions. So not just the first pass. We went through the first pass, right? First pass, you went through all the questions. You saw, okay, if I can do this in under 2.5 minutes, if I can do this under 3 minutes, I'm going to do it. And maybe you'll get to like maybe five or six questions that you like did literally like within 2 minutes. You knew how to do them. You did them extremely quickly. Then you want to go get through a second pass. Now, during that second pass, what you're going to do is you're going to see, okay, now do I know how to do a question? Even if it takes like 3 minutes, 5 minutes, if I know how to do it, okay, I'm gonna try to solve it. That's your second pass. Your third pass, okay, I don't know how to do a question. I don't know how to do this, or this might take a long time. Might I might have to do some calculations. Then you do those types of questions during your third pass. So as each pass goes along, you sort of increase the threshold of which you start accepting to do the question. So that's get through as many passes of the questions as you possibly can. And another thing I wanted to say is that you have to manage your time, right? All of this is meant to manage your time like really, really well during the exam, because that's one of the main things about like even FM, even P, especially FM and P, and even this exam as well. You want to manage your time very, very carefully. Third is now we'll get into some of the conceptual ideas and concepts related to FAM that you want to make sure that you avoid and you don't do or just want to keep in mind. So first is that the discount factor is always E for whole life insurance and annuity. So typically in FM, you've seen the discount factor as 1 over 1 plus I or V. But if you're using P or V exclusively, unless it's a expectation question, right? So if it's the expected curtate lifetime or if it's the expected continuous lifetime of person aged like 63 or something like that, then and you want to get to like if it's E60 and then you have E60 term 2 plus E63, right? P3. Yeah, if you want to discount the E63 to the present value, then you only use P3. Yeah, then it makes sense. But if you're referring to a whole life insurance or an annuity question, you want to just use E, which is V times P, right, which takes into account both interest and survivorship as the discount factor. You want to take both of those into account when you're discounting, when it's whole life insurance, when it's insurance, or whether it's an annuity question. Four is start writing derivations as soon as you read the question. So there's a couple of different paradigms. You could be one paradigm where you want to actually just think about the question and like really understand like from get to A to B. But what I've also noticed what also works really well, and you really just have to try these practice exams and see what works really well for you, is you just start writing deviations as you or derivations as you read the question. So if you're reading a question, it's like a selecting mortality table, and it's in it's in the number of lives, and you know that no, if it's number of lives, you probably want to convert it to probability or in terms of p. So you want to immediately start doing that, right? You want to save as much time as you possibly can. So and the way to do that is even if you see something that you know you are going to have to do. So if it's like finding A or finding A50 or uh, uh, or the annuity, you want to do that as quickly as you possibly can because you know that you're eventually going to have to do them. So you might as well just do them now. So start writing those derivations, start doing those calculations as soon as you read the question, as soon as you know have an idea of what to do. Intention setting is absolutely critical. So even before you take the exam, just set your intentions. Like, okay, I this is what I got to do, right? This is I'm going to be if a question takes under 3 minutes, I'm going to do that question, and if it takes me longer than 3 minutes, I'm going to move on. And one of the other things that's critical is even if you know how to do a question, even if you do the question, even if you don't get the correct answer, you still move on, right? So one of the tricks here is you actually keep the if it's like a for example it's like a gross premium question, you keep the like equivalence principle like equation, right? Future benefits equals the future or expenses or premiums. You want to keep that equation on, right, on your sheet or whatever it is, and then you want to come back to it. And because you've already kept that, then you can come back to it, and then you can think about, okay, what are some of the things I have to change in order to make this actually work? So you want to if you don't get the answer to a question, you want to move on, but then you also want to make sure that you save your work. So you save like, okay, this is question one, and I this was the work that I originally did. Because it's possible you probably mistyped something in your calculator. It's probably like a small thing in the equation or something that you didn't consider or even read in the problem. So it's probably like a small thing. So if you save your work, you're able to save a lot of that time when you go back to it. And then variance of the loss at issue or loss at time t is equal to, right, that formula right there where we factor out the constants. And this is used when the equivalence principle is not assumed. You can also use them when the equivalence principle is assumed, but then this simplifies even further. One of the things is you actually use one of the common mistakes is you're using the simplified equivalence principle formula when the equivalence principle is actually not used, right? It's not assumed. So that's one of the common mistakes is you use this when there's no even indication that the equivalence principle is used. Now, when it says UDD, right? When it says UDD or uniform, and again, uniform distribution of deaths is different from uniform distribution of deaths between each year of age, right? You want to keep that in mind. Anytime there's a number of lives, random variable question, I immediately think of binomial distribution. Because if you think of binomial distribution, what's the crux of it? It's the number of trials, and then you have a probability assigned to each trial, and you have each of those trials are independent. Whenever you have like a number of lives or a number of something that also has a probability attached to it, think of binomial distribution because the variance for that is NP times 1 minus P, where you're again the main thing you're trying to solve in these types of questions. What's the probability? Like, what's the probability that someone dies between age 3 and 7, and then you can extend that to like 100 people or 100,000, whatever the number of people is, and that's actually the number of trials in that you're modeling in the binomial distribution. Compounded annually versus continuously compounded was a mistake that I made. So continuously compounded, you use E. Compounded annually or compounded whatever number it is, like 4 times per year, or something like that, you use the exponent, right, to the x, raise it to the x. Covariance of z1, z2, where z1 and z2 are the present value of the future loss variables. You want to break these down into, okay, expected value of z1, expected value of z2. right? So I have two of these present value random variables. What's the expected value of each? And then if I take the product of those, what is the new random variable that's created, and what is the expected value of the new random variable that's a product of those two? So that's how you do that. Probability that age 60 survives 2 years is age 60 survives 1 year times 61 now survives another year. So just a thing to normalize. Expected value of the second moment of the Cartade of 80 is the sum of 2k minus 1 times probability of 80 survives at least k years from 1 to infinity. So the square here is associated with this 2k minus 1 that we multiply to each kp80. Another thing is the term insurance from like for example from 50 term 10 is equal to I over nominal interest rate 12 times the whole year term insurance 50/10. So you also want to make sure that this rule also applies. Right? So it works for this one, it works for term, and it also works for regular. And uniform distribution of deaths, as we know, is if we have TQX, so probability that age X dies within 3.3 years. So if it's less than 1, then it's just 0.3 times the entire year, the probability of death during that entire year. So that's where right T is between 0 and 1. So those are some common things. Again, one of the main things I want to emphasize is really this time management portion. That's one of the things that like people really struggle on, and I struggling at currently, right? Is you want to get through as many passes of the question as you possibly can. If you do see a question that you don't know how to do, it's important that you skip it, mark it, and move on. And a lot of these conceptual items are also very important as well. You want to start doing calculations as soon as you seek the question to save time and get through as many passes of the questions as you possibly can. Don't remain too attached or like too focused on one question. Like it may seem like, oh, you've already invested a lot of your time and energy on this one question. It's okay to actually just move on. It's okay to move on. It's recommended for you to move on. You don't want to be spending additional time and energy on a question because you've already spent a lot of time and energy on that question. So these are like a lot of the tips. Again, the main one is time management. You'll get through the content, but like one of the things you'll realize as you take, increase more difficult exams on coaching actuaries is like time management is very critical. Okay, so I think those are like the 10, 15 tips I wanted to go over for this video, and I'll see you in the next video.